Welcome back. Today we're going to look at my 1987 Squier Stratocaster E-Series made in Japan ST362L. Today we're going to look at the neck. We've had a little issue with a slight bow in it, so we're going to work on that a little bit, as well as the tarnish on the bridge components. So let's get to it. So the first order of business is going to be string removal. Always want to remove or loosen the skinnier strings first to make sure that you don't burst them when they come off, because these strings aren't all that old, so I'm going to be using them as spares. We are going to restring it, but I am going to use these as spares, keep them handy. They're always good to keep handy if you have a good set or a fairly new set, so that if you do happen to break one while you're restringing or playing and you need a quick fix, you've got a spare sitting there. It might not be great, but it's better than nothing. And something to remember when removing the strings: try and keep them all in one piece instead of cutting them halfway along there and making more waste. Keep them, and if you are not going to reuse them again, like I say, I'm going to be keeping these around for a little bit as they're not too old. You can take them to your guitar shop, and most guitar shops have a bin there to take used strings in, and they can either recycle them or dispose of them in a environmentally friendly nature. Now the strings should just come straight out the back of your guitar through these holes. It's going to be a bit of a drag pulling the curly through, but I'll make that as straight as I can. And voila. Some people have said they've had trouble getting the string to come out of this end, the balls to come out through the hole. If so, people will take toothpicks, a small, straight, skinny screwdriver, and you can go put it down through the hole in the front to push through. I have never had any trouble with this guitar. Well, not a lot. But I have had trouble with my brother's 1997 made in Korea Squier Strat. If you do have any issues, make sure you take the curly part at the front here and try and straighten it out as much as possible to allow for it to slide effortlessly through the bridge setup. Oh, cut one. And watch as these here strings are sharp and will poke you, as I just found out for sure. Straighten out the coil as much as possible. These thin ones don't need it as much. It's more for the thicker, heavier gauge strings, but and with that, strings are removed. So now I'm going to take all the strings, count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes, make a coil, bring the tails through, roll it down to the squeegee end, and then repeat. those strings. Now, as I say, these ones aren't too old, so I'm going to keep them aside and use them if I need be. If I get through a couple of weeks and nothing happens, I have no issues, then I'll probably make sure I put them in the pile with the other ones to go back to the guitar shop. Okay, so next thing we want to do is remove all the bridge components here. And for that, I'm going to use the smallest Phillips. Twist a little bit to see that you're being left-handed. I always turn them the wrong way first. Okay. As you turn them, you'll see that the springs are expanding and going to come off well. I'm going to put my finger on the spring itself so that it does not spring off into Never Never Land. We want to keep all that together. The screws are not threaded into this L shape at the bottom of your bridge assembly. That is so that when you do tighten them or loosen them, the bridge moves with the spring. Okay. This is where it would be nice to have an extension and a drill or electric screwdriver. Maybe when I grow up, I'll get one of those. And note that the springs are beveled. They're skinnier at one end than the other. The fat end goes against this plate, the skinny end that way. It is also a smart idea to keep all your hardware in a small container that will not let it fall all over the floor, because these are small items and easily misplaced. Okay, so now we have all the hardware in a little bowl. Going to, at this point, take the Allen key that they provided with the guitar originally and take out the little lugs that are in the end of the bridge. Saddles, I guess is what we're going to call them. Best to do this part right over top of the container you're keeping everything in. And it's also best to see what way works quickest. Haha. Now you will also notice that the lugs that go into the bridge, you have 4 that are shorter than all the rest of them. The 4 that are shorter are for the high and low E, because your neck is curved this way. The 2 outside ones don't have to push up as far. And the thing is these springs, as I say, were beveled at each end. What we're going to do is take the rest of the bridge components and give them a Coca-Cola bath. I'm not sure that that's recommended, but we're going to find out anyways. So we're going to put those all in a Coca-Cola bath while we work on the neck. The springs, though, are so thin, I do not want to risk putting them in Coca-Cola and having it create a problem. So we're going to leave them out of the bath. So we have 6 saddles, 6 adjusting screws, 4 short lugs for the outer ease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 long ones for the inners. Take all of these items, put them all in here, and Coca-Cola. Oh, not a paid promotion. Okay. All of those items will soak in Coca-Cola until such time as we need them again. But we're going to work on the neck while we do that. I wanted to get this stuff off so that we could literally have them soaking while we work on the neck. So the next order of business is neck removal, which are done by these 4 screws on the back of the neck. So you're going to get yourself the large insert for my screwdriver, and I'm going to loosen them all off first before removing them. So when you're removing the screws from the neck, and you take the neck off the body of the guitar, keep an eye out for little shims of wood in between the neck and the body. Sometimes the neck doesn't quite fit right, and they will put a little shim of wood in there to keep the neck straight on the body. It's rare, but it does happen. Maybe at the end of the season they mismatch some necks and bodies together and they just don't fit right. And that's how it happens. Okay. So for neck screws are going to go, oh, why don't we put them in the Coca-Cola bath? Now mine has a metal plate and a rubber gasket on there. So we're going to put that aside and carefully flip over the guitar again. And this is where I'm saying keep an eye out for little wood shims in here. Take it out, none in this one, but of course I've had this one off many times. Don't know if you'll be able to read it or not, but there it says FST362/L. And at the body, 362L with an H. What the H and the F are, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Thing is, it fits in here perfect. So, we're not working on the body so much today as the neck. Now, it may be very hard to see, but there is a slight bow to the neck that I wanted to work on, and I have numerous times taken the Phillips in here. If you tighten it if you tighten that screw, what will happen is the bow will go this way. The more you tighten it, the flatter it gets. If you loosen it, it's going to come up on the ends and low in the middle. That's the way a truss rod is made to work. So I've done this, I've been in this one many times before. I'm not going to use the Phillips. I'm going to use my large straight blade. Okay, I want to turn it this way and it does not turn, it is stopped. It will loosen somewhat sometimes. Just not right now. Okay, there it is loosening. And then it loosens completely. Okay, but we want to tighten it as much as we possibly can. Now, when it stops moving and you cannot do it anymore, stop playing with it. The adjustment inside, there is a metal beam that goes the length of the neck. It goes from the end to end, and it is in a curvature this general direction. When you tighten up that screw, it wants to pull up on the rod in the middle because it wants to shorten it, and the pulling up of the rod pushes down on this part of the neck. So that is how that straightens out. Okay, while we have it apart, we just found that this bottom machine head is loose. So we will get our socket set out and make sure all of those are tightened. So I've tightened the screw as tight as I can, and just looking down it, we can see that there is still a bit of bow to it. So I have devised a clamping mechanism which will should go in this manner. I'm going to put a small wooden brace at either end. Now, the truss rod only actuates from about here, where the neck, it does not work on this end of it. It works between here and there. You'll notice some later guitars, newer guitars, have the adjustment here. This is an 87, so it is in the base, which means you have to access it through the back. Now, I have made out of wood myself this little neck shaped edge. I'm probably going to put something between that and the neck anyways, which will take the shape of an old washcloth. You just want some material between that and here so that there's no wood to wood contact. It's going to be just make it a little softer, a little easier on the finish. Now at that, I'm going to place all of this somehow. Yeah, that's what I remember. Okay, so this is not very easily done, but how do we do this? We will get this part. You can see how I've got that set up. Wood on the first fret, wood on these here last few frets. I don't ever play with them up there, so we're not too worried about that. Now we want this to go roughly about center. Between the two pieces. And then we will take our clamping mechanism. Okay, now we're just going to get it to the point where we know everything is in the right spot. And that means moving this here little piece right into the first fret. As you will see, it's not touching on either. This one I'm not as concerned with because it's way up high. It's not going to affect those. We're about center. Okay. And we'll take this away to find that I have it just slightly backbowed. Okay, so now it's got a slight backbow to it. We're going to see if that's what the issue was with this here end, and it was. So now I would have been able to turn that another quarter turn. Woohoo! Okay, do the release. Remove the clamp. Look down the neck and it's a little bit better. I could probably go a little bit more. So back to okay, just tighten it enough so it holds tight enough that I can adjust it. Make sure that this is in the right spot. This is in the right spot. That is not in the right spot. Need a bit more room. Fine, I say, fine. You want to be that way, do you? Okay. Get it to just a bit of pressure spot. Double check our alignment, which means getting this perfectly straight in the middle, that perfectly straight in the middle, and tightening it up a bit more. Now we look down the length of the neck. Get it adjusted to the middle in the middle. Give it a little more squeeze. Check what we've got here. We've got definite back bow, definite back bow. So now we will once again take the blade, give it another quarter crank. And that definitely has back bow on both sides. What I'm hoping is that once I release this, will be straight. Okay. And now the neck is she's pretty flat. Now I've got it pretty much flat, but when we put the strings back on it, that is going to pull pressure on it. So I might even go one more, even though it's a pain in the butt to do. Go one more time. Now I made this setup other than the clamp itself. This was just a Rona 2x2 cedar. It's actually a rung from a banister of a deck. But today it's my clamping adjustment. Enough pressure on there to get this centered up. Bit more pressure on here to create a bit more back bow. Let's make sure that we're level and going across the whole neck, and that the back is flat. And a couple more squeezes. To create a little bit more back bow. Look down the edge. We got lots of back bow on that one. Okay, so screwdriver again. A little bit of a pinch. And how does it look now? Flat as my ex-girlfriend's bum. Okay. And away we go. So now we're going to move on to a little more tightening, cleaning sort of a thing. But first, coffee. Okay, so we got ourselves a 10 mil socket. That is what fits these. So we're going to get the 10 mil socket on there, which unfortunately doesn't work with that being in there. So we're just going to hand tighten them. But you should be able to get a pretty good tightening on those. This way anyways. You might need a deep socket if you really want to get them super tightened down. Alright, now check the machine heads. They all seem to have, okay, one's a little looser than the other ones. On the very end of them is that Phillips. Might not be able to see that, but there's a little Phillips screw right in the end of the paddles. That tightening down will give you a little more tension and make it so that they don't go out of tune as quick. So that's the bottom one is the one that seems to be the worst. Everything else seems not bad. These two can probably take just a little bit of tightening. Not much. And what that does is there's a little nylon gasket in between the paddle and the head. It just tightens it enough. That one's too tight now. Too loose. There we go. This one will tighten just a touch. You can tell as you tighten them how it's going to work on them. That one's a little too tight. That's too loose. Too tight, too loose. You're just going to have to go by feel on these. It doesn't take much to tighten them up. Check them for feel. Number 2 can go just a tad tighter. Okay, I've messed with them enough. They're all consistent. Once again, take the 10mm socket. I'm doing this by hand because the spindles will not allow the thing to reach, the socket to reach once you put the ratchet or adapter or speed handle, whichever. Those are good. Okay, so cleanup time. Fretboard doesn't really need anything this time. As we can see, there is, well, maybe you cannot see, there is fret wear on there. We're going to have to, well, these frets were fairly soft in their day, so they're probably going to need a refretting at some point, but I'm good with it for now. It doesn't bug me any. As I say, I don't play it very, very often. Alright, so we're just going to do a good wipe down. I've got a little bit more of the hydrating formula here, so I'm probably just going to do that on the fretboard itself. Ooh. Also not a paid promotion. I used Diageo because that's what's was available in the kit when I bought it last year. And that's whose strings I use anyways. And there we have it. I usually use a different cleaner on the headstock, but not much is needed on this today. I'm not going to wipe down in there because I don't want to wipe off the markings. Okay, and now the neck. Pretty much exactly where I want it, flat as a board. And then once we've got the pressure on it, it will bow just enough. You do want just the slightest bit of bow this way to your neck, or this way, but not much. Fairly straight setting here, and then once the pressure comes on, we should be fine. For the body, we're going to use my spray cleaner. Spray the rag, not the guitar. As I say, I've had this since 1987. It's had like no mods done to it at all. It is all original. We are probably over the winter months going to come back, and I've wanted to shield inside underneath the pick guard, pick board, all that. We're going to take all that out and shield it because it has not shielded, and they're single coil, single winding coils, blah blah blah, noise, static crap. So we're going to work on that. Possibly might even work on changing the pots out. Squier, in their infinite wisdom, made me a left-handed guitar. They either used left-handed pots or they wired them backwards, which is another way around having to get left-handed pots. But they left the right-handed knobs on, so if I turn it to 1, that's wide open. I turn it to 10, that's dead off. Just one of the problems of being a lefty. You get used to it. It's a right-hand man's world, I tell you. Well, a woman's world. Person's world. Alright. That's good enough for what we're doing today. As I say, I wasn't going to go do a monster redo, just get it ready for winter. But one thing I did want to do while we had it out is remove this back plate and see if my claw is grounded, because I saw it in a YouTube video and I had this off before, but I don't recall seeing that. So let's take a look and see. It is. A little black grounding cable going up to the claw. The claw! Alright, let's throw these here rusty screws in the bath for a few minutes. And we'll take a look in the back here while we're doing that. Wipe off a little more around the edges. You will notice a piece of wood in there. I don't use the tremolo system, so I have put in a wooden shim, cut it off flush, so that does not move at all. These are there simply because at some point I might want to take this out, or if some next person, whoever owns it after I die, might want to use it. So there we go. Maybe we should take the front plate off while we're doing this too, seeing that we've got everything else apart. If you have one of the newer guitars as well, these two screws at the base are longer than all the other screws. So keep that in mind, that will mess you up. The two screws beside the tremolo setup are about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch longer than the rest of them. Now that is on, I know it was on my brother's 97, it's not so on this one, which is an 87. I'm going to take a look in here because, as I say, in one of my future videos I'm going to shield this one. So when removing the pick guard, all these things are wired in, so you want to be very careful. You do not want to just pull this thing off. Wires. Okay, let's go this way then. Okay, so when we do go to do the shielding, we're going to get the tape, either copper or aluminum conductive tape, to do the base all through there and around these pickups, because all they've got for the shielding is just around the pots. Cool. Alright, it's a good thing I did take that off, because now I know that we'll have to do that as well. Either that, or I might just get a complete pickboard set up that's already done with upgraded, and then I'll just do it that way. But here we go. And when you're replacing this, make sure that you get the wires for the pickups in this trough. And that sits flat. You do not want to pinch any of those wires. Okay, next, start putting in the screws, but just get them started. Don't tighten them down until the end. The other reason you don't want to tighten these down completely is because you want the board to be able to settle in the proper spot before you start tightening it all down. You start tightening down these ones and working your way around, all of a sudden this is shifted out of the way, then you're going to have an issue with the screws. Where's that extra screw from? There. Okay, so now all the screws are in. Go around, make sure they're all planted to just the point of friction, and then slowly tighten them. Not too tight, because you can strip these real easy. They're a small screw, so snug is what we want. Okay, clean up the rest of my plate. And I'm not sure why they did this, but Squier as well. Offset those two center screws there. Now this here is beveled. Make sure the beveled part comes up, not down, because all you're going to do is break it. There's not enough material between the hole and the edge. So this goes on that way so that you can put your strings through. But guess what? It also lines up this way where you can't, which doesn't make any sense. They offset these two. If they put them both at the same spot, then you wouldn't be able to put it on back or wrong at all. Whatever. Okay. I'm going to leave that off because those screws are still in the bath. Time to replace the neck. Fits in here, and they pretty much perfectly, but there is a little bit of adjustment here. That is going to be taken up by the screws that we put in when we flip it over and put the screws in. So now when you're replacing the neck, put the neck in, put this on top, put the plate on, take our 4 screws that have been in their Coca-Cola bath, they're now clean. Okay. Whenever you are putting any of these back together, start the screws by hand. Do not use power drill or something and put them in there, because you want to make sure you get into the actual holes that are in the neck. When Squier made this, they had those things aligned perfectly so that the neck was in the exact right spot. You want to make sure that there's no chance at all that you would start new screw holes and get them screwed up. So there you go. Always start your screws by hand. And then once you do that, come around and sink the screws, but do not tighten them down. Just like the pickguard plate, go till you get the resistance and stop. Now I'm going to pick up the guitar and check the neck, make sure that it is seated properly. And it is. So now we can continue on, tightening down in a crisscross pattern. And just do a little bit each time, because you really don't want to strip these out, and you really don't want to make new holes. You want to make sure that you're in the right spot. I'm going around about 4 or 5 times and just putting a little more pressure on each time. And it won't tighten anymore. Won't tighten anymore. Won't tighten anymore. Won't tighten anymore. Double check again, make sure that your neck is seated in there properly. Okay. Look down the neck. Flat as a board. I've been waiting years and years to get that thing flat. Well, 3 or 4 years. It spent a lot of years in storage, not being used. And when I got it out, there was a slight bow to it. I flattened as much as I could. That locked up. Do not force the truss rod adjustment. If it locks up, you leave it and then talk to a professional. You don't want to force it. That's why I put the clamp on to bend the neck and then do that, because all I was going to do was just strip it, and I didn't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. Then it's a new neck or a very expensive repair, because you have to take the fretboard off the neck, literally separate the two, and then fix the truss rod and bring it back. And you don't want to do that. Just common sense, people. At this point, I'm going to verify that I got all my pickguard screws tightened. actually a couple of them were a bit loose, so that's a good thing. Always good to go back and double check your work. Let us make sure those are tightened. It's always a good thing to go at screws that you're not able to access easily and make sure that they are in. And always use the proper sized bit or screwdriver. Alright, next order of business, we're going to put that back plate on, which means fishing the screws out of the Coke bath. One moment please. Okay, what I'm doing here is I've taken them out, but I'm wrapping my fingers around the threads and giving them a good cleaning that way. That way anything that was in the threads that the Coke did not remove is removed, or at least a lot closer to being removed. As you can see, there's a lot of, well, you probably can't see, but there's a lot of rust on this here cloth now. I did wipe off these here big screws that I had in the Coke bath as well. As I say, not a paid promotion. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the plate, beveled side up, string screws to the bottom to align with your tremola. Okay, once again, start by hand. Make sure that you feel the threads being threaded into. Believe me, it will save a lot of hassle that way. You'll notice a lot of people have their guitars and there's no cover on the back. Guess why? They wrenched it down way too tight and broke the plastic. They put the plate on backwards and broke the plastic. Okay, proper bit. Sink, do not tighten. Details. You gotta follow the details. So many people aren't detail oriented anymore. Okay, there we go. Now, don't clean it with a rusty rag. Find a good clean spot. Alrighty, here we go. Next, what do we need to do now? More screws, more screws. Make sure your strap pegs are tight. That'll merely ruin your day if they're not. Okay, now let's next start looking at what? Slight hairline mark. see it in certain areas there. That is just a crack in the finish. It's not in the guitar itself because it is off kilter. If it was completely straight, then you would know that this guitar was made out of multiple pieces of wood and it's a crack down the seam. But it is not. It wobbles, so it's not a crack in the wood, it's a crack in the finish. Not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. Might refinish this one, but I haven't so far, so I don't know why I would think of doing that now. Alright, let's turn this sideways, bring up my hardware pad, and items that were in the Coke bath. Take a quick look at them, and they are just as rough now as they were before. So that didn't do a damn thing. Let's take green Scotch-Brite. Okay, so I went over one of those two with the Scotch-Brite. I'm guessing you'll probably be able to tell which one it was. So I'm going to have to go over them all slowly. And that's going to take a while, so I'm going to put you guys on pause. We'll come back at the end and show you what happened. So what I've done is, with the screws, after the Coke bath, take them with the screwdriver, pinch them in a piece of cloth, twist them a few times just to get any extra dirt out of the threads that the Coke might not have gotten. And the Coke bath did not really do too much with the tarnish of the bridges because, well, the saddles, excuse me, because, well, I only had them in there for a couple hours. I didn't leave them overnight, probably what should happen to really get deep cleaning, but they're a heck of a lot better now than they were before. So I just put the screw in the cloth, pinch really hard on the threads, and turn the screw around. That will help clean out anything in the deeps. Okay, now the long and drawn out part is going to be these lugs, is what they really are. Long and short lugs for the saddles. And I'm going to be doing the same thing, only with, of course, a very small Allen key. And yes, this is a very long, drawn out process, but it is worth it in the end. You want to have as clean a thread on these as possible. I might also go over them afterwards and give them a little oil rub down with maybe some lemon oil that you put on fretboards, because that should be delicate enough for these things. You got to be careful what you put on your guitar. You don't want to put like WD-40 down the truss rod hole or anything like that, because some of those chemicals are not made for wood, and the glues that hold the things together, you could be just opening up a new Pandora's box of problems. And when you're threading these back into the saddles, be very careful to make sure that they thread in properly, because we're talking about very small items with a very fine thread. If this messes up, you might have to end up getting a complete new set of saddles. For instance, that one just about went cross-eyed. You want to make sure that when they start smooth and run smooth. So once again, it's the detail. You want to be absolutely sure that these are threading in properly and straight. You'll be able to tell fairly quickly, but I did almost have trouble with 2 or 3 of them. I looked over the saddles themselves. I did not see any numbers on them. They didn't seem to be, any of them didn't seem to be higher than another one, like a different shape or anything like that. So I'm taking it that they're all the same. Last time I put it together, I effed up and put these short lugs in the bottom 2 strings instead of the 2 outside E strings. But that's something you learn as you go along. That's why I'm doing this, so that maybe you won't mess up like I did last time. Okay, now for reassembly of the saddles and bridge mechanism. What we're going to do is this is one with the larger, so this is one of the center 4. I'm going to put that down there. We take the screw that comes out of the bottom, it goes through the hole, and then the spring goes wide end to the base, up through there, and into the end of the saddle. So we go that way, and it should screw into the saddle. It's a little bit of a task because of the spring. Okay, first off, let's make sure that this here does go into there accurately. And it does. Okay. And try and thread it with my fingers this time, like I told you guys to do before and didn't do. So put it in with my fingers so that we know that the threads are proper, and in we go. Now I usually bring it right back as far as we can. For some reason, intonation tends to work better that way. Okay, so one last time, here's how we do it. First thing you do is take the saddle and the screw, make sure that there's no issue with it screwing into the end of the saddle. That's the first and most important part. Okay, so that works good. Saddle down here, screw through the hole in the end, spring on the screw, fat end to the base, push it in far enough that you can get the end of the screw to the end of the saddle. Start thread by hand. Once it is grabbed, then you can tighten it down. Okay, so now we've got all the saddles and the lugs in the proper ones with the short lugs on the 2 outer saddles. Bridge assembly is back together. Now, what I found last time I did this, and I was wanting to intonate, which is what we're going to end up doing here in a bit, it's best to pull these bridges right in as far as you can, because that way if you loosen off it, if you have to loosen it off, the string will go down in tone. If you have to tighten this, it's going to put extra pressure on the strings, and you take a chance at breaking one because you're going to be tightening the tension. So remember, these strings or springs aren't that heavy, so you want to just compress them, don't force them. But if you've got them way back, then intonation would be a lot easier because you're going to want to loosen only. Taking a look down there again, there is ever so slight a bow in it, but that's fine. That's where we want it. It's as flat as it's ever been for all the years that I've had it. So now, restring. So the strings we're using are Diageo's nickel wound XL, EXL 120s. These are like 9 to 42. I like an extremely light gauge because I want to bend the strings, because I do not use the tremola. So any of my adjusting of the tone or that is done by bending. So that's what we're going to go with. These say that they will give you perfect intonation. We'll see about that. Either way, let's get them going. So Diageo had these bundled in 2s. Use either safety glasses or be very careful about unwinding these. You don't want to poke yourself in the eye with this at all. And they come with a nice little color coding on here. Not sure if you're going to be able to see the color in the light or not, but so the low E or fat E, 6th E, has a gold knob on the end of it. The next one, the A, has a red. So we're going to put the red aside. And we will load up the low E. You'll be able to see through the back of this here hole here. I can see daylight through there, so I can just... Okay, now when you get to this point and the gold is about to flip in through there, you want this to go about another 1/2 of an inch once it gets in there. If it just disappears and stops, that's not right. You want it to disappear and go this far. So there it is, just disappearing. It goes to that depth, then you know that you've sunk that string to its max. Okay. At that point, away we go. With electric guitars or 12-string guitars, anywhere you've got the 6th, anywhere that you have these 6 tuners on the same side, rule of thumb, go up through there, go up past 2, and cut just beyond the second one, or about yay inch, 2 inches or so. So if you have a 12-string or a guitar with all the tuners up the one side, go past the next one and past the next one. You want to go 2 spindles up, and then you can cut at that point, and that will give you the proper amount of windings at this end. So we've put the tail, put the string through, left ourselves a little bit of room to stick out, not much. I've got like maybe about 1/8, 3/8 of an inch. Make a curvature in a little crink to make sure you got it spin around. When the tail comes around, when you're turning it, make sure that the string goes under the tail. You always want your strings to roll down into the guitar. Make sure this is all sitting straight properly. The windings go down into the guitar. Check your distance from the string out to the edge of your neck. Make sure that that's good, and then just tighten up enough to get a slight tension on the string. Okay. Now for the next string. String goes in. Now, See the red end? It gets right up to this hole here. I'll show you again with it. So the red is just about to disappear. Stop there. Lay it down. I've got my finger where the red is just out to the end. Pull it up that far, then you know that that red knob is sitting directly on the end. Okay. Give that a little crank. So now the string's in, you come up into the nut. You want to go to the second spindle. So you go 1, 2, past it, and that is where you cut. Holding on to the garbage end so that you don't lose it. It doesn't go spinning across the floor. Tail saved. Put in a special spot where you're going to be able to find it afterwards. We did the A, the E, next is a D. D is black and G is green. Watching your eyes when these flip so that you don't kill yourself. We are working with the black, so the green goes aside in a safe spot. So third string, third hole. It goes through. String comes back. Okay, black spindle right to the edge. Lay it down, pull up. You know that that is up full depth. Okay. Up through the nut. Two spindles past. Or tuners, whatever you want to call it. Clip and hold the tail. Spring comes out through this tuner here, a little extra, and under the tail, under the notch you put in the back, and keep winding. Putting it in the string tree. Uh-oh, did we do it? And I want to go back and make sure we're winding down into the guitar. Okay. And inspect. Yes. I'll get it all strung up and then we'll come back.